I'm coming to you today from another rainy day out at the stream, and hopefully it won't be a total washout, but I'm excited because we have been looking at streams throughout this entire series. We looked at macroinvertebrates and how to tell the health of a stream. We looked at habitats and learned about some animals like turtles that might make a stream their home. And today we're going to be looking at actually even taking it back to the big picture. How is a stream even formed? I love watching the water, and I have spent some time watching how the water flows around rocks and moves around, and it brings up a lot of questions in my mind. And I've done a little bit of research and done some reading and learned that that is all called stream morphology, how a stream is formed and how it changes the land. And we're going to take another look at that, deeper look at that today. I've got this stream behind me that we're going to be exploring. We're not just going to stay here on the bridge. We're actually going to go down into the stream and get closer to where the water is. This is the Skipback Creek, which is a tributary of the Perkiomen Creek, which then flows into the Schuylkill River. And for those of you who have been to Riverbend before, you know that the Riverbend actually sits on a bend in the Schuylkill River. So today we have access to this creek, so we're going to spend a lot of time here. But we're going to take a look at some maps and see where Riverbend fits all in. If you've been to Riverbend before, you know it's really hard for us where we're sitting at Riverbend to actually get into the Schuylkill River. There's a lot of obstacles in the way. So today we're going to take an opportunity to kind of get down and see what happens at the bend of a river. So before we go all the way down into the water, we are going to take advantage of this nice vantage point of the bridge. There are a lot of things that I am noticing here, and I want you to take out your science journal and practice some observations about this stream. This is an activity that you can do at any stream. So after today, I want you to find a stream in a local park or maybe, in your town or your backyard, and just sit and observe, listen to the water and make some observations. I'm going to give you a few minutes of silence so you can enjoy. So hopefully you had a few minutes to make some good observations, and you've got a nice drawing of this creek and what you're noticing about what you see. I'm going to point out a few things to help guide us in our investigation today. When scientists study streams and stream morphology, there's 4 terms and 4 different parts of the stream that they talk about. Today we're going to be discussing riffles, runs, pools, and glides. Now the first is a riffle. I am going to point that out first because I think that is the easiest for you to see on video. So if I point my camera down, do you see where the water is breaking over those rocks? The water's really shallow there, so you can actually see how it's bubbling up and breaking. That area is really high in oxygen because the water's just kind of moving all around, and it's getting mixed up in the air, and it's got lots of oxygen. Think about what kinds of things might live in this section of the stream. There's a lot of oxygen, which is great, but if you were to live here, you would need to be adapted to be able to hang on when the water's moving quickly and tumbling over those rocks. There's certainly some macroinvertebrates that can do that. So I'm going to move upstream a little bit, and then in the middle of my frame, you'll see what is called the what's called the run. And this is where you see deeper water that's still moving. You don't see it moving from a distance as much because it's deeper and it's not breaking over those rocks. That in this case is coming right before those riffles. the next point, so we've got the run, we've got the riffles, and then next we're going to talk about a pool. And so over here, what's happening is you have this tree that has fallen over the water. Remember, trees over the water decomposing is a really good thing. It provides habitat for macroinvertebrates. It puts nutrients back into the stream. But in this case, you can see on the left side, the water's moving, still moving pretty quickly. But on the right side, what has formed is a pool. The water's pretty stagnant there. It's not moving. This could be a good place for salamanders or frogs to lay eggs. Think about what kinds of things could live in a pool. And then coming out of the pool, you'll see a glide, and it looks like the glide is coming out underneath where we're standing, so we don't see it as much. But a glide is where the water gets deeper and it's still moving quickly as it exits the pool. So now that we've seen the high level view of the stream, let's go take a walk and get down in there and see what we can find. So this is another vantage point of the foam that we're talking about. And I did a little bit of background research, and there are a couple different types of foam that you might find in a stream. There's certainly foam if you have a pollution event and there's some sort of chemical that's in the water that's frothing up and causing a disturbance. But there's also natural foam that occurs. And it appears to me, without a lot of research, that this might be what's happening here. It's actually part of the natural decomposition process as aquatic organisms and plants are interacting with the water and breaking down. It's creating this sort of surfactant material, and as the water is rushing over these rocks, it foams up. And you'll see differing amounts of foam depending on the day. We were down here yesterday, and Emma commented to me that she saw a lot more foam. It looks like it's less today. It did rain overnight. I don't know if that has something to do with that. This is also another cool vantage point to see that pool. And you see where the tree has crossed the river. It's lying across the river, and there's that really cool pool that has formed. You also get a good look at the glide coming out of the pool as well. Hi everyone, so here we are down in the water. I decided to take a little bit of break this morning because it was pouring rain, and we came back this evening and it is sunshiny, so it's perfect time. So remember that bridge that we saw earlier today? There it is, and here we are in the water. I thought it would be really cool to take a close look at those riffles. So I'm gonna turn my phone right here. Can you see how that water is just sort of breaking over those rocks? We've got lots of small rocks that are underneath the surface of the water that you can't even see when we're standing at the bridge, but the water's breaking over those bigger rocks. And when I run my finger over those rocks, it's really slimy. So there's definitely some algae and things that are growing on those rocks, probably some macroinvertebrates. And when I look at this rock, it's really wet, but I'm gonna try to find an example of a drier rock so you can start to see the types of rocks. We see sedimentary rocks in this stream, and I'm gonna try to find an example of what that looks like for you. Okay, so now where we're standing, you can see the riffles behind us, and notice the water is super deep. So here we are in the run. So we're right before the riffle. We are in the run where the water is still moving quickly, but it's deeper. So you don't see that water breaking over the rocks. And this is a great place to find some living things. In fact, I just spied a little crayfish. We'll see if we can get an up close look at him. Oh, we've got a little crayfish living underneath the rock there. He blends in really well. He's super camouflaged. There he goes. See him moving around? He is living underneath that rock, and he just keeps poking his head out as he sees the disturbance in the water. He's probably hunting for some things, and then he slides back in. So we've moved out of the center of the stream. I took a look at the riffle and we stood in the run, which was really steep. And then we've walked our way over to the other side of the bank, and I just found something amazing. If you recall from a few videos ago, we were listening to frog calls. Well, the result of that is right here in this sort of pool area. It's still water, it's off to the side, so there's not a lot of movement here, and it is the perfect spot for toad tadpoles, which is, I'm seeing a lot of them. So we talked a little bit about the rocks that we are seeing in the stream, and the things that I saw in the stream were certainly eroded away, the edges were rounded, and I thought I would take a moment to show you what's going on up above. And here we have these super cool licheny cliffs. You see that, and looks like we've got some ferns, we've got some native vegetation, which is cool, but we also have some rocks, and these are really characteristic of this area of Pennsylvania. These are really thick sedimentary rocks, and like I said, they compress together. It's sediment that's pressed together, and it almost looks like bricks. It's like brick-like, but these are natural rock formations, and we might be able to even find one where you can see layers of sediment that have deposited over time. If you're walking around southeastern Pennsylvania, you're going to see a lot of this type of rock. And I'd also encourage you to visit Riverbend and compare the rocks that we see in the Sawmill Run to what I'm seeing about 15 miles west of there. Another example of what we're talking about behind me is this really cool licheny cliff. The rocks look like bricks, right? They've sort of just been compounded together over time, and they are not smooth edges at all, so it's not really impacted by erosion like you would see those rocks that are in the middle of the riffle where they're smooth on the edges. These are really thick, hard brick-like rocks. So we're going to see how close he'll let us get. Great blue herons are pretty common along a riparian area or a stream. We don't see them as much at Riverbend because we've got that tiny little stream, but I bet they hang out a little bit closer to the Schuylkill. And when we're at the preserve, we're spending more time in the forest and the meadow area. He's letting us get pretty close. I actually can't get much closer without going down this cliff, and that would definitely scare him away. Let's see if I can get a little bit closer. So we have hit a point where there is no more dry land. So we are about to walk through that water. Luckily, we've got water shoes. We're gonna take it slow and we're gonna put the phone away so we don't do any damage. So here's a good example of that sedimentary rock. And if I look closely, you can almost see the layers of sediment. It looks like lines across the rock where over long periods of time, it has become compressed and formed a pretty solid rock. Now here we are on the stream bank again. Our tadpoles are down here in this pool, but I want to also point out to you that we're seeing lots of rocks, and here is a smaller pool that seems to sort of be trapped. So there's no water flowing in and out of here right now. I would imagine after a big rainstorm you would see more water flowing, but right now this is prime habitat for tadpoles. If we were to start to flip over some of these rocks, I see these decaying leaves. I imagine that we're going to see a lot of macroinvertebrates here. And if we look at the rocks, we see big boulders, we see smaller rocks, and then we also see just these little pebbles here as well. So this shows us that these rocks are being broken up and they're being sort of eroded away by the water, and this is a constantly changing system. In Pennsylvania, especially in our streams, we see sedimentary rocks, which means that these particles all just sort of come together over long periods of time and get cemented together at the pool of a lake or a creek. We've made it to the end of the dry stream bed without a lot of mud and falling on these really slippery rocks. And I wanted to show you this really cool spot. This is where our little channel that we're on intersects with the bigger Skipback Creek. So you can see it almost comes to a T, and we're about to walk into the creek, and we're about to find a spot where there's an actual bend in the creek, which is really cool. It reminds me of Riverbend. So we've just walked past the waterfall, and we are at another part of the stream here. And now that you've got some experience with this, I want you to take a minute and think about what part you think this is. The water's moving quickly. It's not riffling over the rocks, but it's definitely moving. It's very quiet. My guess is that this is a run. And then when we move down, just like upstream, turns into a riffle, which leads to our little tiny waterfall, which was a surprise. And then at the end of the waterfall, we saw some pooling, we saw some glides coming out of the pool. And we're about a mile downstream from where we started, from where that bridge was. So just shows you that this river moves in a similar pattern throughout the course of its run. And we can predict what types of things we'll see throughout the course of the entire system. So I want to just take one moment to talk a little bit about human impact, and this is a perfect example. I know that a lot of people are spending a great deal of time outdoors, and it's a lot of fun. And I'm seeing more and more of these rock sculptures out where we hike, and I think, you know, it's really an example of where people are appreciating and connecting with nature. I also want to point out, though, that rock sculptures like this one and even larger ones have an impact on our environment and on what's happening in the geosphere here. So this stream, what we've learned is the rocks hold together this stream bank. Macroinvertebrates make their homes here. Lots of different types of wildlife make their home here. These rocks are critical to the stream, and everything that we do impacts the stream. When we take rocks out of the stream and put them into sculptures like this, it takes away places for macroinvertebrates to colonate. There are animals called, little macroinvertebrates called caddisfly, and they literally weave together the pebbles and help to stabilize the stream. And when we do things like this, it really disrupts that whole process. So I would encourage you to spend time in nature, enjoy what you find, but leave it the way it is. Take pictures and don't disturb the environment. And this looks like it is pretty benign. You know, most people see this and think it's just a beautiful way that we interact with nature, but don't necessarily realize the impact that it has on the ecosystem here. So thank you for joining me on that pretty adventurous day down at the stream. It's always really cool to be down here right after a rainstorm. I don't know what it is. Maybe that's something we can explore in a next lesson, but After a warm summer rain, I find sometimes is the best time to go out and look for wildlife. We saw lots of things. We saw crayfish, we saw great blue heron, tadpoles. I even heard some frogs and saw some ducks as well. So in addition to learning all about the stream and stream morphology, we saw some pretty cool things along the way. So I hope you had a good time. Please go out and draw pictures of the stream where you are, make your own stream model, and continue learning through the summer. This is starting to come to the end of this series. We're going to do one more video, and then we're excited to announce that Riverbend is going to be launching a family nature club. And we understand that this summer you're going to be out there with your family exploring nature wherever you are, and hopefully you can join us along that journey and share some of the things that you are finding where you live.